also you can figure the effective age, and I'll go over that in a minute. And then you go through overall condition, room count, square footage. And then here you go over other areas where you can make separate adjustments, like with theaters or if they have a pool. And that's where an appraiser can make separate adjustments for those type of amenities. And as you get into larger custom homes, you'll have more and more of that. Then garage count, landscaping, additional extras. So that's what they'll start with. And then they'll come down and you can see across the board, they considered the location of the subject property superior. So they added 75,000 and then made separate adjustments for actual acreage. So it's good to break out those two adjustments. In fact, Robyn and I were just talking about that earlier. You can have your per square foot cost, but then there can be things about the lot in a cul-de-sac that it's got a better view, in a gated community, it's got a stream running through it, those type of things. So that's why it's important to separate out the adjustments and not just throw a lump lot cost. And then design and appeal, he found comps that were all very similar, which is ideal. And then quality of construction, you look at the difference in quality on larger custom homes, you'll look at woodwork. Things to be aware of here is, for example, if you have a little 1,500 square foot home out in West Provo, and they put Wolf appliances and all high-end granite and quartz, and they're not going to get a return. That's obsolescence at that point. So things to look at as you're making those adjustments to your properties is the more similar they are to other like properties, the more what they do contributes value. And if they go one way or the other, like a big custom home, if they put vinyl flooring in, that would be a huge negative and you'd have to adjust for that. In most cases, what would it cost to put hardwood flooring, tile, or other comparable flooring to what that property should have? So those things that you would look at in quality of construction. Okay, that's not design and appeal. The design and appeal, let's say someone did a big custom home, 10,000 square feet, but it was a geodesic dome. That's a big problem because not many people are going to pay the type of money for a custom home that's a geodesic dome because it's just not typical. And then again, condition and look at overall condition. And then bedrooms. Here, he was adjusting $3,000 for bedrooms above grade. And then you can see at the bathrooms, he made the adjustments here. Those are things, again, that you can extrapolate from the market in a similar way that I talked about extrapolating square footage. Marshall and Swifts and others can come up with bathroom count. Right now, he said that he's adjusting, depending on the quality of home, anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 for a full bath. So in your probably 600,000 range, you'd be about 5,000 a bath. As you get into the larger custom homes, you'd be 15,000. And then here you can see he adjusted on this one, $80 a square foot. So what was really nice is he had this comp, larger square footage above grade, and then two here, and he used 6 comps. We'll get into the other ones. And then these below, so you can see where it starts to bracket it. And he probably, my guess is maybe plugged in $70 a square foot or maybe 90. And then as he made all the other adjustments and then came down to the square footage, he ended up at the $80 a square foot for above grade. And then basement, you've got 2 separate adjustments. You'll do the square footage, which right now he said he's between $20 and $30 just for raw square footage below grade. And then you'll go into adjusting for the finishes. And that one will vary depending on your comparables, because a lot of basements now are decked out with theaters, gaming rooms where they have a lot of electronics. And so you'll want to take that into account. And you could actually do that as a separate adjustment for a theater like he does down right here on other area.
So Randy,
yeah,
I'm going to pop over here.
Okay.
One of the important things to note as we're looking at this is that the appraisal and appraisers make an adjustment, and they start with a base price per square foot, but then you want to make sure you don't double dip. So you either make it in your finished square foot adjustment, or you make it down in your extras area. But if like you wouldn't up the adjustment on the basement finish and then also give it credit down below in the extras.
Yep. So that's where you, good point. And that's where you, right here in the below grade finish, is if you had your standard for homes in the $1.5 million range, you make those across the board adjustments, and then come in and make a separate adjustment if the basement included a indoor pool like some do, or a theater or specialty item, then you'd come down here and make that separate. But you always make adjustments based on total square footage in the basement versus finished square footage, because oftentimes there's a difference in finish. Just like all these had 100% finish, but because I had the big unfinished shop, I was 80% unfinished. And again, this comp was very similar in total square footage, room counts, where these were a little bit smaller total, but this basement was very similar. So these were really good comparables. And then utility use, typical, all these are typical. Again, this would come in where there might be some obsolescence, or if the functional utility was different. For example, let's say you had a big custom home, and this is just an unreal scenario, but let's say you had a big custom home, 10,000 square feet, and they had a 1-car garage. That's beyond just the lack of not having the additional garages like you came up here. That would actually be functional utility for the market for that type of property. Now, in a less extreme case, let's say that you were doing a home that's about 5,000 square feet. Everything in the neighborhood was built out at the same time. All the homes had 3-car garage, except for the home you were listing. It only had a 2-car garage. So on your difference in garage adjustments, like right down here, he adjusted 12,000 for the additional garage. But in that case, the adjustment may be much bigger because it's expected to have a 3-car garage in that area, in that size of home. So either you do a larger adjustment for the garage, or you could look at it as functional, which I wouldn't really consider that functional at that point. It's just, I'd take a bigger adjustment on the garage. And then landscaping, you want to look into that. There's can be a huge difference in landscaping. Someone could put their grass in and have a couple of starter trees. And then the next house that you're looking at, they've got full landscaping. They've got hardscaping. They've got fire place put in place. They may have a pickleball court or something, which you would adjust separately down here in extras, where they went from the gazebo and the fire pit and additional fireplaces, and they would adjust. Now, this one had a large in-ground pool. I'm familiar with this house with all the rock work with the slide coming into it. So he took off 50,000 because of those extensive improvements. So again, you'd take into consideration those type of things. And it's more in custom homes. When you're dealing with your typical entry-level homes, you're not going to have that wide of adjustment, but you've got to be aware of each of those things. And then the adjustments need to be within the gross adjustments. I think it's 15 or 20 and 30, I think is what the span is now. So if you've got a comp that you're using and your gross adjustments are 50% and you're 35% on net, it's probably not a good comparison to use. And that's a good checkpoint. I don't know if CMA at the bottom, do they show the percentages of your adjustments, your gross and net adjustments like this?
No, it doesn't actually break it out as far as a percentage, but you can kind of do the math in your head, because you can see if you've over adjusted, and if you have, then throw it out. I think a good rule of thumb, and definitely it doesn't net or gross, but if you're over 20% or 25% in an adjustment, then you should probably pick a better comp if you can.
Yeah. And here you see net adjustments overall were all pluses. It'd be ideal if one of them was less, that would show that you better bracketed the home. And I think he has that in the next set of comps. So any questions at all before I move past that? I mean, does that make sense, kind of the process of using comparables to come to a price?
Comment really quick. Is it a stupid question to ask if we understand what we're adjusting to make them balance? So if you have your subject property and you have your comparable, you're adding property, you're adding value to the comparable to bring it up equal to the subject, right?
Yes, or taking
better
away.
than the subject, you're bringing it, you're subtracting off to bring the values to the same. Does everybody understand that? Okay, just want to make sure.
That's why it's so important that you bracket. I mean, ideal is to find all three comps identical to it and they all sold within the last week. But if not, find one as close as possible to the subject, one superior, one inferior, because that's what's going to bring you to the center and show you what the value is on the market.
Randy,
Yeah.
how do we know though what to adjust for the things that aren't standard?
Okay.
Like, how do we know the amount?
So again, that's a little bit tougher. You go out and create, right now, most appraiser softwares do that. But for example, if I wanted to know what a 3-car garage contributed versus a 2-car garage back in the day, I would do all my other adjustments except for the garage and see what the difference was there.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of a process, and I believe in the CMA tool, and Robyn will go over that. There are some of those adjustments in place. Some of those values are there for you.
Right. And I'll speak to that when Randy gets done, as we start looking at the WFR CMA program that's in there.
When it says add additional things, it's hard to tell what to add, like for the pool or for the extra landscaping. There's a lot of things in that CMA that don't cover those things.
Yeah, and pools are unique. In the past, I actually deducted for in-ground pools if they were in a lower end home. Because of our winter and such, pools weren't contributing much money at all. And in some cases, pools required in the concessions was to have a pool filled in. I had that happen twice. The pool was to be removed or filled in before closing, which showed that the pool contributed no value to the home. So those are things to be aware of. Now pools are becoming more common and contribute value more in Utah. In the past, they maybe contributed 20% of their cost. But that's a good question, Joy. It's a lot of times people will look at a percentage of cost depending on if it was typical or not. So right now, pickleball courts are becoming more typical in people's backyards, but that also depends on the price range of home. If it's a small starter home and they had to put it so tight on the lot that it took up the entire lot, there was no space for anything else, then you look at some of the functionality of that and it wouldn't contribute as much as someone that was on 3/4 of an acre with $1 million home. Does that make sense? That's why you can't just put a set value on each item. Okay, and then
really good explanation. Thank you.
And then these are just more comps that he compared, and you'll see down here, this one came net negative. So he was able to bracket it good. And then you don't just take the average of the adjusted values, you weigh them against each other and take a weighted value. And these were actually listings that he used, not sold properties on these two, which is also typical on the higher end homes when there's not a lot of data. And so you'll take, and again, it'll drop the per square foot, which is helpful as well to look at, but it doesn't tell the full story because of the added amenities and difference in lot values. Let's see, then he will just come to his comments, a conclusion of the comparables he's used. And then again, he pulled in this additional comparable cell that was another active listing, which this one was actually probably overall most comparable in that they were down in a PUD back to a stream like my property did, but it was much bigger above grade. And again, here you can see our basements were almost identical sites, so no adjustment there. However, they had more finish, so he's going to take that adjustment. And then at the end, he'll add the supplemental in here addendum, just telling the scope of the appraisal, how he arrived at it, what processes he used, go over the additional features, you know, like that is natural stone, split shake, start defining porch caps, limestone slab. So defining that so that the reader of the appraisal can look back and say, okay, I see why he showed that the quality was very good. I see why the condition was average, is because it was a 15-year-old home and the carpets hadn't been replaced, things like that. So that just goes through a more in-depth narrative, explaining, like just adding that the shop was heated and wired for 220 and had hot and cold water. So those are additional features to add so that the reader understands why those adjustments were made above. And those are just the add-ons, the updates, and then down here he'll lay out the floor plan. He just actually took photographs of our plans, and then let's see where, and then they'll just put the photos of the subject, and then comps photos. Let's get down to that so that you can see how well he did in selecting comps. Where, okay, so here's comp number one. You can see very similar architecture, quality, design, everything very similar. Landscaping, stone walls similar to subject property. So did a really good job in selecting the comparables to start with, and that's what makes it so much easier in the appraisal process. Then of course you'll just lay in the plat map. In my case, I had bought additional property behind me. So this is the subject. And then right here, and these are things to be aware of, and no, you don't have to know all of it for legal, but we did a lot line adjustment because of where the stream ran. I made an agreement with the people behind because I own both of these lots, and this lot used to run to that side. And this one here, the stream, we just did a lot line adjustment to follow the stream all the way through. It just made more sense for them on that side, me on this side, to landscape it. And then I just bought that property. So those are things to be aware of. The appraiser, that's why in the beginning you saw he had two separate tax ID numbers. And then got to define the legal, where it came from. This one was the meets and bounds. And then this was a lot as well. So
that is a meets and bounds.
And this one was a little more complex as we pulled the stream. And then, so that was for the first piece of property. This other one was actual lot 2, plat B. So that other one was for that little piece of property that I purchased. Again, these are things good to know, and how they affect the value. Because, for example, had he not pulled this, not been aware, where this runs right here, this is lot, but I actually built out a stone wall all along the back here, and my sports court actually hung out back here on this piece. So actually part of my house was in Cedar Hills and part in Pleasant Grove, because this is actually Pleasant Grove. Now, because it was a landlocked piece and we didn't have to attach it, in some cases, the city will require that be attached, and you need to be aware of that, or could be a conflict and there's no value actually contributing to the main structure here. Okay, let's see, anything else that would be good to know. And then again, the plat, he did the plat showing how it's set on the property, because I had that. And then you would define where these were. The importance of this part is because this is where you come in with your adjustments and such. Alpine is typically, people look at it as higher value than say Cedar Hills where I was at, but we happen to be in just a pocket of custom homes that nothing in the area compared to, and really have to go outside the area to find comparables. And again, you just have to explain why you went there and why you made the adjustments. And I think the rest is just kind of aerial photos and then market condition addendum. And this is something that's good to be aware of, mostly just to explain to your clients what's going on in the market. And everybody kind of knows right now, it's in news all the time. That's it. That's kind of what a appraiser goes through. There's a bit more to it than most people think. Any questions before I unshare the screen? And anyone want to see anything on the appraisal before I unshare it? Good. So go to Robyn now. Are you guys able to see what she shared? No?
No.
Okay, I'm not seeing it either. So I'm not sure, because you clicked share screen and you popped up just the same that I did.
How about now?
Okay, go back to share screen. Now, let's see. You have to take it from here. Is it within there? The MLS within this?
So even no matter what, if I walk over to that.
No, because that's not sharing. You're just popping out of it. So go back into the click share screen again. Pull down here. Where's your?
But at a home here that's 40 years old, 500 is probably appropriate.
Yeah.
What you can see here on the basic CMA is that there's nothing that talks about condition or quality of construction. And so I'll show you how to add those adjustments.
And a good way to kind of facilitate that in your knowledge as you get to know the comparables and your subject property. If you look at the bottom where Robyn has the adjusted values 415, 444, and 476.
Okay, and there's more. The
It,
way this runs, they've changed it. I don't love it. It used to be scroll down.
oh,
Now
yeah.
you've got this that carries
side.
over. So you have
Oh, good. So you look at all those comps, the adjusted values, and you're not going to take an average of those. You're going to take a weighted value. So comp 1 and 4 might be, or 2 and 4 might be the most similar to the subject property and have the least amount of adjustments. You're going to give more weight to those at the 442. Let's say these two are the most similar, 442, 476. So you may conclude 450 to 460, even though this one came at 415 and the other one came in at 500. So that's how you weigh those at the end, is what out of all your comps, which two are the most similar, and you give more weight to those as you conclude your final value. You don't just take an average.
And that is something that would be shared with them in your conversation, in the presentation of your CMA, because with this particular program, it doesn't have the ability to order them in based on the, or put a little checkbox in which one is most comparable. You would just do that with the photos and in your presentation. So if you can make the adjustments through here. If you see something that is glaring, for instance, I was working with Cindy some months ago, and one of the comps, they had put all of the square footage above grade, where it was obviously a rambler with a basement. So you can change, and it was skewing everything. So this does give you the ability to edit the comps and you do that over here with this little edit comp mode, and it opens up all of those fields. You wouldn't do that unless you can see that there is something goofy. I mean, agents sometimes will put that there's 0 basement square footage, but you can see in the pictures that there is a bathroom and maybe 3 bedrooms and a family room. So you do have the ability to adjust the comps if needed. Just be careful with how you do that. So now if you want to add things beyond just the very, very basic data of square footage, bedroom, bath count, garage, blah, 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 you go add adjustment factor. That is optional. And here they are. So I'm going to go back and show you that again. So down here at the bottom, add adjustment factor. Okay, so let's say we go, okay, we want to put in condition, and because we know that we are working within the same neighborhood, we won't do location. But if you were working on a custom property like Randy's was, and you maybe had to pull from in the same school district, but from different cities, you could go ahead and pull location. We won't. And then you can put in some of these extras. They would be actually line item, where in the appraisal, there was one line and you kind of bunch them together. These would be individuals. Quality of construction, let's pull that over. There is the time adjustment. I'd be careful with that. Appraisers, if you've pulled your comps within the last 120 days, you will see the change and you can weight the comps anyway. Randy, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think appraisers are doing time adjustments.
There's so much available data right now that they're not. Now, if it was a larger custom home wasn't selling as much, then they'd have to show the comparables. There's been this incremental increase in these at 1% a month or whatever it is, and apply that.
Okay.
But that's rare because there's so much data right now.
Okay. So anyway, there are these factors that are preloaded, landscaping. Mother-in-law apartment is kind of a nice one that you can throw in there. And so we'll just say, or you can create a custom factor. So for instance, as we work with in Walsburg, we may have a property that has all things are equal except one has water rights. So depending on your market, what you're working in, you can actually create a custom factor and it would be in there. You could pull it over.
One thing about mother-in-law apartments, so it's very important to distinguish whether it's a mother-in-law apartment or a legal accessory apartment, because if it's a mother-in-law apartment, the only contributing value you're going to give to it is that there's an extra kitchen in the basement, things like that, an entrance to the basement. But if it's a legal, recognized by the city, the county, that it's a legal apartment that could be rented, all of a sudden it has larger contributing value because it's income generating. So you have to differentiate between, because there's a lot of listings. Oh, great mother-in-law apartment. Well, that just means we have a bonus kitchen for added value. It doesn't add value because if it's not legal for rentability, there's not the same value contribution.
Right. And actually, Joy and I were working together on a property, and a lot of the comps did have, hers had a mother-in-law, but a lot of the comps had legal accessory. And so you could see a huge difference in those price points. And if you were working with this, you can see their mother-in-law apartments there, but legal accessory is not. So you could create a custom factor, pull that over and use that to do your adjustments. This is a really simple one, so we'll just stay simple. This is just that you know that those things can be done if you are working often, because the basic CMA that you're pulling up is just those archived values. If you're working often in the same market, you can go ahead and tweak back on your adjustment page and save it. So you don't always have to change those every single CMA you do. And you can always have it including condition or quality of construction. Actually, I'm going to get rid of quality of construction because pretty much all the comps that we're working with today don't apply. Okay, done. Now you can see that they came back in here and they are the blue ones. So when it comes to condition, there's and quality of construction. And again, Randy, expert. It's kind of a 5 category in each one, right?
Yeah, are you talking condition or quality?
Let's say quality. Well, let's start condition first.
So with condition, the way to look at that, let's say you're going into a 15-year-old home, but they just finished the basement 3 years ago, completely refinished the basement. Well, the effective age of that home may be closer to 7 or 8, depending on the wear and tear on the upper level. If they have replaced a few of the carpets or updated a bathroom, you might have an effective age of 6 or 7. And then you'd look at your comparables as well. Maybe it's another 15-year-old home, but they finished their basement 10 years ago. Nothing's been updated. Effective age might be 12 on that one. So that's where you bring those into a line, and it makes it easier to adjust when you determine the effective age of each property. From there, you can, like I say, we used to use a service called Marshall and Swifts that would come up with what to apply based on the property for effective age difference. But what you can look at is say, well, the effective age is mostly wear and tear of flooring. What's that cost per square foot in this type of home? It's still got, a third of its life left. So you just adjust the difference. If it's older home and the kitchen hasn't been updated, but your subject has, again, that would shift the adjustment age. And you may on a kitchen or a bathroom make a separate adjustment because they brought it completely up to today's standards with steam ovens, things like that. You'd want to look at that.
Okay.
But effective age is a really good way to bring them in line with each other and just make an adjustment per year.
Okay. So you could go back to your adjustment factors and do it the way Randy has suggested. Often what we're seeing in our market is that people have gone in and updated their kitchens and maybe their bathrooms. They have some new flooring and things. And so you need to say, okay, well, here's my subject, which is maybe looking a little worn. Maybe the kitchen's 12 years old. And then you've got one just down the street where the kitchen's been remodeled and it's all been spiffed up with new moldings and things. So what I like to do is assign a condition with new construction being a 5 because it is perfect. Being a 5 and a home that really needs everything redone, a 1. So let's say this subject, and I haven't looked at it, but I'm say maybe this subject is a 4. And what it would take to remodel or bring that house. Now you're not going to get dollar for dollar, but let's say in this price point, to update a kitchen and put in new flooring and paint, you're maybe looking at 40,000, and maybe and it's been a year since you did that. So let's establish a value of 30,000 for our condition. So that's 300,000.
Nice, really nice kitchen.
So we've now established what the subject is. Now we would go to each one of our comps and look at them, and just for time's sake, I'm just going to say, okay, this one is maybe a 2. And you can see it now adds 60,000 worth of value to make it similar to the subject. Let's say this one is a 4. Let's say this one is a 3. So it adjusted the value on that one, 30. Maybe this one's a 4 and this one's a 4 also. And I don't know because I haven't really gleaned these,
Well, in a good,
but that's what you would do, is you'd assign a value for the subject, or you'd assign a value for the condition upgrade, and then what your subject is, and then bring each of your comparables, like this one, or let's make the subject a 3, just for case. And we're saying, okay, so this house has been remodeled in the kitchen and maybe bathrooms, and so it reduces the value by 30. You can do the same with landscaping. If, let's say, this house here has great landscaping, and we're just going to, let's say, 1 or 2, or actually, I just don't even want to do the landscaping.
a good practice to get into as well when you're doing this, especially the kitchen and update,
Mhm.
is call the listing agent and ask them about the property. When I did appraisals, I always confirmed every comparable, and I had my set of questions ahead of time about that property, would ask the agent about the everything about the property that I needed to know to make my adjustments.
And agents will be a little nicer about responding to an appraiser than they are another agent, maybe. So you may just have to glean that as much information as you can from the MLS sheet and the photos, which are so helpful now.
Yeah.
That was not the case.
One other thing to really differentiate with condition, is it a cosmetic thing or is it structural? Is it something like, for example, if a roof is close to end of life, that's something that would probably need to be taken care of right away, or it could create more damage. Whereas worn carpet, you can live with worn carpet if you need to. So when you're doing these condition evaluation of the property, you want to look at the structural versus just cosmetic.
Yeah. So you could add, let's say, this one had a new roof. Let's just throw in roof. And now we've got a roof, but let's say this house needed a roof, and that's a good $20,000 bill. This one is yes, this one is a 0. So it added the 20,000 to bring it to the subject. You'd have to make sure you make the changes on all of your comps. But that does allow you to then bring the comps into adjustment. So you're coming up with a better price, because if you haven't made those additional adjustments, you'll see a span. And anyway, and because it's not in there, if you've never played around with the CMA, you wouldn't know that you could actually do that.
It's good.
Then,
Robyn?
Yeah.
So on the condition, you're using the 1 through 4, which is the appraisal conditions, and then on the roof, or if you add a mother-in-law or you add one thing, 1 means yes, it has it, or 0, it needs it. Is it 1 and 0 meaning yes or no?
well, you do have to, that's the important thing. You have to assign a dollar value for that thing. Maybe roof here isn't a good,
But you could put a 5 over here and let's say their roof is brand new, but this one looks like it's a third of its life's gone. This one's half life gone. This one's an end of life, and make adjustments according to that. Or you could do a 4 and do it based on quarter. Let's say a roof had a 20-year life and one's been 5 years down the road, 110, 115. So you could put a value of 4 here. And if you wanted to get a closer, finer adjustment as well.
yes.
So the
Yeah.
4, the 4 would mean, I'm sorry, I'm losing my, I'm sorry, I can't talk. The 4 would mean that it is excellent condition. And then a 3 would mean it's 75% or 25% worn, 50% worn. And that's how you would create your adjustment that way, by giving it a numerical value.
Right, right. I think on quality of construction and condition, for our purposes, a 1 to 5 scale is really good, because it's poor, fair, average, good, excellent. So on both of those, I would use a 1 to 5 scale and assessing the subject and then each of the comps. On this one, we just threw roof in there because just to show that you can make an adjustment, and you can really fine tune it by giving it a range. You do have to know what value to put in there for that. But if you were speaking to this seller, you're like, actually, this house has a new roof. This number 1 comp here, we would say they have a new roof. Somebody's going to have to come in and within the next 2 years put a roof on. So there is a dollar factor that buyers will have in their mind. So it's just a way to introduce that conversation and make this make sense. Let's, better than that, let's add an adjustment factor. Let's throw in a mother-in-law apartment. So the mother-in-law apartment that maybe the subject had, yes, it has one, and none of the others do. And let's say that mother-in-law apartment, just to have the convenience of the kitchen and a place that guests could do their thing, but it's not rentable, it's not income producing. But let's say that's a $10,000 benefit. Then all of the others have now a $10,000 adjustment.
So another thing to be aware of in our current market with when you're looking at it's a mother-in-law apartment, legal accessory apartment, is can it do nightly rentals? Because that affects the value as well. Because if they can go through Airbnb, if they can do nightly rentals, potentially they have higher income generating property than if it's just a regular apartment. So those are things to consider. Now, is the everyday buyer that savvy? Possibly not, but it is becoming more and more something that people are aware of.
Yeah. So I'm just showing you how you can customize the basic CMA that is here provided through WFR, because you've got those unverified archived values. And let's say you're like, okay, that's fine, but I'm really not happy with this garage adjustment. And we know that a third car garage will pull, let's say 7,500. It might be more like 10,000.
18 is what they're between 15 and
Yeah.
20 is what Scott said he's currently adjusting on garage. Now, if it became excessive, like if it's typical for a home to have a 2-car garage, but they have a third, then you'd make an adjustment accordingly. Now, if they had a 6-car garage on a house is typical too, each garage contributes less. Like there's a home out on in Highland, right on the main thoroughfare, 110th, that's listed, that has, I think, a 12-car garage, but the house, besides all the garage square footage, is only about 4,500, and they've got it listed at 3 million.
Oh.
Because they think there's so much contributing value to the garage. Sorry if any of you listed it, but
Okay, so one thing that I would change almost immediately is that garage value and save it, and also a carport, because you cannot do a carport for 1,000. And here's the other thing that is kind of, I think, is incorrect. As this is automatically loaded, the price per square foot is $1 a square foot per acre. So each square foot of that acre is $1. So let's say the difference between this just under 2/10 of an acre and this hovering near a third is only $3,500. There's no way. Yeah, Randy, like, no way. And I'm like, correct. And depending on the market that you're working in, if you're listing homes in Provo, Northeast Provo, for sure, it's not that. Maybe Eagle Mountain, possibly. But so you could change that. I would say average right now, raw land is actually twice that. So you can see how that more correctly adjusts. So I would probably tweak this and then create your own new and bring those over, assign the values. I'm going to save it as just new factors.
and a good way to figure out that adjustment between a quarter acre, third acre, for example, is go to some of these new developments and they'll have a list of standard lots versus premium lots and just see the difference in size of what they're assigning to from quarter to third. And so developments, you can go into them. A lot of them will have that list out that the house that they're quoting is X amount, but a premium lot, which is usually a larger lot, or maybe it's at the end of a cul-de-sac, what the premium they're putting on that. And that's showing you what the market's establishing. Because again, like when I was an appraiser, all we did was report the market. We didn't create it. We didn't control it. The data was already presented based on what agents were listing properties at, what the willing buyer was willing to pay for it. So the market established all of the data. We just go out and collect it. We don't determine the data. Does that make sense? We don't determine values. The market determines the values. We just have to know how to interpret it.
Yeah. So you could create your own adjustments using this unverified preloaded one. And let's say you were talking with somebody now and they're like, okay, can you give us an idea? And then we're actually going to do the list our home in the fall. Well, you don't necessarily want to reload all of these adjustments that you've made. So you would save this CMA. And then also once you've kind of honed in on what adjustments you like and the values for them, create your own adjustment values. You can see that I've got a whole bunch down here on properties that we were working at one point. We were dealing with a lot of farmland. And so I always had to make an adjustment for outbuildings and or one for water rights. And there was one back in the days when listings didn't, we redid we redid the CMA about 6 times over an 18-month listing period because that was typical. So anyway, you can establish your own set of adjustments using theirs as a basis and then fine tuning it and adding the factors that you think are important based on that property.
And another thing, be real careful not to get caught up into cost, because a lot of your clients will say, well, it cost me this much to build that building. It doesn't matter. The cost is the contributing value. And that goes for anything. There's a house I appraised up on the hill in Provo years back, and the owners had hand painted silk wallpaper custom done in China that was uglier than anything I'd seen. They'd spent $150,000 on this hand painted wallpaper, and I told them it's probably actually going to cost money to remove that for someone to move in. They didn't like it. They were offended by it, but basically zero contributing value of that $150,000 they spent on this hideous hand painted silk wallpaper. So again, cost and contributing value are completely different.
Yeah. So you can, after you've done all of your adjustments and things, create the CMA packet and decide, just how we can talk about that some other time, but decide what you want to include. And you can throw in a picture here. You can change the font. You can put your photo in. Again, that may be another time, but it does then full comp, full photos. If you do full photos, you'll have a let's see, you will have a 40-page CMA that you'll want to email, but it comes up nicely. Oh, see, it tells you, okay, you've got a lot of comp photos there. And I guess many of you have already, excuse me, done this and seen how it prints out, but it's a decent presentation that's very presentable. It does allow them to look at the photos and kind of come to reality with their particular home.
Does this have disclaimers in it? Because I talked with the attorney when I was looking at going to start doing some more CMAs. And I'll see if I can find the verbiage that I worked on with them. But it would be very important to put in a disclaimer if there's not one here saying this is only an opinion of market value specifically for the use of said client. So name the client for and the limited.
This one.
Okay. Yeah. And you could add something. I'll read through that, but I would possibly add something that says it's limited to their use of how to price their home on the market, that it cannot be used for lending or any court action. And then also something that I will add to mine is that with the current market trends, that you recommend that they update it with you every 3 months. The reason for that is then you keep in touch with that client as they're preparing to sell their home. If they're not ready right now, you're constantly letting them know, I'm going to keep you up to date with the market so you get the listing and they don't go out and start working with another realtor. But is there a place where you can just put your own disclaimer or information in a blank page? Because I think it would be important that we had one that very clearly showed what, because some people construe this as an appraisal, thinking, well, this is great. They may be going through a divorce and reach out to you, hey, can you give me a value? And then they think they can use it in court or something. But
Yeah.
I think a disclaimer is probably important.
We could put that on the front page, or it could be a separate document on the back. I think it's better maybe to have it on the title page, because then it's but once it's emailed, you can show that it was part of the entire document.
Yeah.
But in this, you can see it just makes an average. These particular comps, the subject is the only one that's on the market and it's under contract. I would usually try to find something that was also active, or use an under contract. I just use these as an example, because it will show the trend of what's happening. So don't forget to include those, so you can see it makes some nice graphs, blah, blah, blah. It does make a map for you. And then it restates the things. It's a decent, it's a decent CMA. And once you know how to make those adjustment factor changes, it becomes really especially useful. Questions?
I have a question. So what's the best way for newer agents to know? Because you guys have a lot more experience, so you know, oh, a garage is this, a roof is this. But for newer agents that don't know that off the top of your head, what's the best way to get familiar with what value to assign different, qualities of the home or parts of the home? What's the best way?
One thing I would do is, if you knew you were working on a specific property, and let's say it's a custom home, I would call your preferred lender and ask them to check their archives and just say, hey, can you shoot me over an adjustment page of a loan that you guys have recently done in this area? Take all of the redacted so it doesn't show the property, the owner's name, or the exact property address. They can show you the comps, and that will pinpoint and show what appraisers currently are using. That's probably, for our purposes and based on the resources, without buying a program that was pretty expensive, I'm guessing for you, would be the easiest, fastest, best way.
Okay.
And once you do this enough, and you know where the neighborhoods and things you're working in, then you kind of start to know anyway.
And Jill, so what I would do as well, anytime you have someone buying the property, if they paid for the appraisal, usually in the process of lending stuff, they should get a copy of it. Ask them if they'll just let you have a copy as well and start. And the good thing is to say, okay, I'm going to get a good feel for properties in the 600 to 700 range, 700 to $1 million, million to 2 million, because it'll vary in those. Also, townhomes will be different than homes because of land costs. And then another good way is when you're out and about, drop in at model homes and ask them for their price sheet. What are they charging for add-ons and adjustments? Now, that doesn't mean that's on resale true market value, but it shows at least the public's willing to spend X amount for an additional bathroom, or X amount to add a garage, or this much for a premium lot. So you start gathering that data, and you could even set up a spreadsheet, just an Excel spreadsheet, and start putting that data in, that in this area for new construction, this is what I'm seeing in this price range. For resales, this is what and that's where you start. But again, it's very fluid. As you start to make those adjustments, you may say, man, on this home, I'm adjusting $50 a square foot. as you're working with it, 52 might make more sense to bring them in line if you have bracketing comparables.
Okay, okay, thank you. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Let's see, any other questions? I mean, I know this was a lot of stuff. You might want to poke around and we could even redo this as far as what's available here on our CMA through WFR.
So I have maybe a suggestion that I might make. Maybe we could send everybody out, send out on Messenger property on the MLS that we could like maybe everybody practice and do one, and then let's maybe come back and kind of see where everybody's value is, and see where maybe if you're like way off from the average, then maybe there's something you need to tweak on your skill set. But that might, a little practice where we're all kind of doing it together seems to make a lot of sense to me. So would you like us to go ahead and pick up maybe a property or two, and we'll kind of go through that, and then maybe in our meeting next time, we can just take a couple minutes at the beginning of it and then kind of go through and discuss where everybody is and maybe where there were, kind of a high or a low that maybe shouldn't be there. How would that work?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. All right. We'll work on that for you then. All right. Any other questions? I think we're pretty much time is out anyway, so we need to get going. But thank you all for hanging in there. That's a lot of detailed information, but you can see how important it is to have that at your disposal so you can make the evaluation and decisions for your buyers and sellers. This is critical to them. And if you do it right, they'll appreciate it, and it'll make a difference in your business, I guarantee you. Thanks everyone for being here today.
Eric, can I say one quick thing?
Yes, of course we are.
Okay, so Randy talked about divorce scenarios. But I would say this actually works to establish a basis. So if you did a CMA for someone to establish the basis on an estate situation, this will hold up. And then maybe a year later or 6 months, 9, whatever, that helps them for their tax purposes. And this is acceptable.
We
I think I just
Rob,
put a disclaimer that it's not to be used in a court, because then if you get pulled in, you want to establish whether you're an expert witness or not. So I've gotten pulled into court deals before as an appraiser, and they wanted to pay me just the general fee, which I think was $22 or something, to come and sit for the court hearing. I said, I need my professional witness fee or I'm not showing up. And the attorney said, no, I'm not doing that. I said, great, then you're not getting a professional witness. So then when I went to court for $22, they started questioning me. I said, I think that property sounds pretty familiar. I think I did appraise it, but I can't recall anything about it. But then when they were willing to pay me my retainer of $700 and then my hourly rate, then I would present and prepare everything. So that's kind of why you put that in there, so you don't get pulled in for 22 bucks a day or whatever it is now.
good point. Thank you. All right. So any other questions? If not, we'll go ahead and let everybody go. I did record this, pieces of it anyway, so that will be available to everyone if you want to kind of go back and mull over some of the high points there. I'm going to stop that recording right now. And